Did you know that over 10% of graduate students identify as neurodivergent? And when we look at undergraduate populations, that number jumps up to 30% in some cases. The sheer number of neurodivergent students demands that departments in higher education cultivate specific ways to support these students. But the question remains, how do you do that exactly? What can and should departments be doing in order to increase accessibility and support for neurodivergent students? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about 4 ways that departments can boost their accessibility and increase their inclusiveness as it relates to neurodiversity. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is creating awareness by developing and attending specific trainings around neurodivergence. Awareness is a critical first step. We cannot address issues if we don't know about those issues. And so we need to be doing things to make sure that we're keeping neurodivergence and disability at the forefront. And so one thing that departments can do is talk with their Office of Disability or their Office of Accessibility and see if that office provides trainings as it relates to diversity, disability, accessibility, and neurodivergence. If that office does provide trainings around neurodivergence, we can ask that office to provide that training to our department. And if that office does not provide the training, we can think of ways where we can cultivate conversation around neurodivergence. And so, for example, we might have meetings in our department that discuss neurodivergence and how we can help students with neurodivergence explicitly. Another thing that we can do is create ad hoc committees in our departments to have them explore resources as it relates to neurodivergence. Perhaps that looks like creating a little flyer or creating a list of services provided by the university and the broader community to help students with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and so on. You can also think more broadly about the research and the research that is being presented in the department. So for example, if your department has research symposiums or guest lectures, you might include somebody who talks about neurodivergence in their research in that rotation. The key first step for the department is to raise their awareness of neurodivergence by having trainings, ad hoc committees, resources, meetings, and even guest lectures about neurodivergence and neurodiversity. As a place to start, you can send folks in your department my video about why we should celebrate neurodiversity in higher education, and the link to that video will be in the description below. After you start building awareness, the second thing that you can do is start understanding and learning more about the divergent communication styles that neurodivergent people have. And in particular, think about autistic folks and their communication patterns. Neurodivergence influences how we communicate and how we interpret the communication that we receive. For example, autistic folks might use language that seems more abrasive, direct, and rude, and so people might interpret autistic people as being more rude than the person intended or meant to sound or behave. Neurodivergent folks might also experience meltdowns or need to stim, and oftentimes stimming involves moving body parts, which influences their nonverbal communication or how their body is communicating with others. And so research and share resources about how to interpret messages from neurodivergent people and how you might understand their messages and what they're trying to communicate in a more nuanced, deeper level. You can subscribe to this channel so you can learn more about neurodivergent communication and in particular gather the resources that I provide you, and then you can gather those resources and share those resources with others. And when you are more clear about these communication differences, you can develop meta-communication in your departments about neurodivergence. That is, communicate about how people in the department are communicating with each other, try to establish norms, but also recognize that not everybody will fit into those norms, and so have an ongoing discussion and conversation about the broader communication in your department. As a part of this effort, you might also think about the modalities of the communication in the department and being more flexible at that. And by modalities, I just mean the channel. So are you sending emails? Are you having in-person meetings? Are you talking over the phone? Are you using Zoom? All of those differences in how we might communicate over different mediums can impact people differently. For some people, it might be easier for them to communicate over the phone, but for others, it might be more difficult given they're not able to see nonverbal cues. And so try to be flexible about how you are communicating and what channels that you're using, and continue talking about what is needed and what is the best way to communicate on a case-by-case basis. Third thing I want to talk about is the term quiet room. And so a lot of different neurodivergent folks advocate for creating quiet rooms, which are places that people can go to where there is little stimulation, where there isn't conversations happening, where it's quiet, where they can kind of reassess, refocus, re-energize themselves. It's a place for people who are stressed or who are feeling like they're going to melt down or who are having a meltdown. There's a place they can go just to kind of recompose, take deep breaths. And so it's an important tool that we can use to help increase the accessibility of our departments. And so you might have a small room somewhere in your department, a closet that you can transform into a quiet room, or maybe there's just a room that's not being used, or you can advocate for a room that you can create into a quiet room to provide students with that place they can go to if they are experiencing stress, a meltdown, or just need to be away from different inputs, different sensory inputs, and they just need to be away from conversation for a bit. After that, you might also consider creating structured social gatherings, and I give this piece of advice with a little bit of hesitation because social gatherings can be a place for people with neurodivergence to experience more anxiety, and it can be difficult for them to navigate conversations and these informal social gatherings. And so what I'm encouraging here is to put in some forethought about how those conversations might happen at the social gathering. I actually just attended a conference where one of the planners put together a social gathering that had like little cue cards that you can use to start conversations because they had specific questions you can ask, and that is a way to help folks. So put some thought into how neurodivergent people will communicate and build new connections at these events. For example, it might be that there is a clear shared task that everyone can do, and they know going into that social gathering that there is going to be that task. For example, it might be that you create a meal, and so everyone knows that they're going to bring a meal and that they're going to sit down and talk to each other over that meal, and that's a place you can bring in the cards to help ensure that the conversation keeps going. You also might start volunteer groups where people know going into it that they are going to volunteer and they're going to do a specific task. Finally, remember that inclusion is an ongoing process. It's a continuous thing that there's no end to it. We can constantly be thinking about how we can refine our approaches. We can regularly assess and adjust what we are doing to more effectively support neurodivergent students. And so I encourage you to hit that like and subscribe button so you can stay up to date on the information that we share about how you can support neurodivergent individuals and how you can coach them to succeed in higher education and in life. And so until next time, have a good one. Thank you so much for watching.